Thank you so much for that beautiful music. Good morning and welcome to White Bear Unitarian Universalist Church. We are delighted to have you here today, whether you're in person attending or you're at home virtually. It is good to be together, a community of youth, adults, and children sharing the values of courage, reverence, and compassion. My name is Claire Schleicher. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a member of the board of directors. If you're accompanied by children today, we warmly welcome you and your whole family to explore our Soul Work Center over here by the windows. There's some different activities you can explore to engage with today's worship service. If you have a joy or a sorrow that you would like to share in the meditation, please add it to our meditation bowl, which is also over here, right next to our Soul Work Center. Or you can put it in the chat box before the opening hymn. But be sure to gain consent before you put someone's full name in the bowl. As WBUUC contemplates adoption of the 8th principle, we're seeking input from all of our members and friends of the congregation during 2 upcoming listening sessions. What will this mean for you and for our church community? The proposed 8th principle says, journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions. Sessions are in person and on Zoom on Thursday, March 2nd at 7 p.m. and Sunday, March 5th at 12:30 p.m. Sign up for a listening session to share your input and help provide valuable perspectives to inform voting on this principle. Visit the 8th principle table today in the social hall. Every carbon offset contribution to WBUUC Climate Action Fund helps pay for our solar edition. Some members will offset intercontinental or continental vacation flights, but more of us take short vacations. We drive to Duluth to sightsee, Whitewater State Park to camp, or Mankato to visit grandma. Enter your mileage in the carbon calculator and offset these short vacation trips. No vacation trips? Donate any amount to the Climate Action Fund to help add solar collectors on the church roof. And please click submit so that we can count the total number of participants. And you can learn more and calculate your carbon offset at wbuuc.org/solar. This Sunday, Reverend Sarah was planning on sharing her final sermon with us, but because of an illness in her family, that sermon will now be happening in 2 weeks on February 26th. We hope you can join us there and then bear witness to her farewell sermon. For those online, our cyber social hour will start 5 minutes after the postlude. In the building, our social hall is once again a hub of connection with informal conversation and, thank you, cookies. We hope that you will all check it out. You can find tables and information about upcoming events that are happening around the church. And if you're looking for a short time of connection and community, our small group conversations are still happening. Those will be on Zoom and in the Emerson alcove. However you participate, these small groups are self-facilitated and the facilitation guidelines will be provided, so pressure's off. In the alcove, they're printed on the table, and in Zoom, they'll be put in the chat box for you at the end of the service. Please grab whatever you need and then find your way there after the postlude. Jody McCormick will make a brief announcement encouraging people to join choir.
Please join choir.
There you go. Thank you. You said it for me.
We are having so much fun, and you're missing out if you're not over here. So I just don't want you to lose that opportunity. We've had big shoes to fill with Baxter and Carol leaving us, but I've been one of the fortunate 4 who's gotten to lead this fabulous group of people, and we would love it to grow. We're trying to get continuity back, and that's going to be starting Got a lot of feedback up here. That's going to be starting, well, it's actually already started by the fact that we now will have the next choir singing on March 5th with rehearsals on the 22nd and 29th of February at 6:30. I got it all right. And after that, the next service is April 2nd, and the 2 Wednesdays prior to that will be rehearsals. If you're interested, you can just simply show up, or you can talk to me or any of these people after the service. And then moving forward next fall, we would love to have our full flank and rank back with us, and that would mean just really needing more seating than what we have over there. We've done it before, we know we can do it again. We will have continuity with rehearsals every Wednesday evening starting in the fall, and music at 2 out of the 2 services every month. So yay, we're back.
Welcome to our church. Together we grow our souls and serve the world in love.
Come in. Come into this place which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes. For here you need not hide or pretend or be anything other than who you are and who you are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together we make it a holy place. I'm Reverend Jack, and my pronouns are he, him.
Good morning. My name is Kathy McComber, and my pronouns are she, hers. As I thought of our theme for this month, vulnerability, the practice of being alive, I thought of those unquestioned rules some of us learned in childhood. Don't get too big for your britches. Never air your dirty laundry in public. It is better to give help than receive. Never complain. You made your bed and you get to lie in it. These rules worked pretty well in my childhood when my entire family and community also practiced them. But there wasn't much room for a healthy way to learn from and tolerate mistakes and move forward with grace. As an adult, it took me quite some time to learn new guidelines. You can be in a community and feel very alone. I married young and we moved away from family to an isolated rural community. Over time, the marriage became increasingly dysfunctional. It took me a long time to identify and work through options, explore them all, until the last possible action, divorce, was the only one left. It is a decision discussed with others, but ultimately the agonizing decision is made alone. There is risk, uncertainty, and emotional exposure, all terms that Brené Brown uses in her definition of vulnerability. Shortly after I filed for divorce, I was grocery shopping in the small local store when my priest stepped in front of my cart and began speaking fervently to me. He had heard I had filed for divorce and was insistent that with counseling and prayer, he could heal this broken marriage. I knew that in our small congregation, he likely rarely had such an opportunity. While he knew me, as I was the music minister and served on the council, he did not know my husband. I don't know from whom he heard the news, but in a small town, very little is really secret and good gossip spreads quickly. When we had this encounter, I felt such pressure to comply and conform. I don't remember how I extracted myself from this awkward, awful conversation with the leader of my faith community. Stepping away from a familiar community is scary. Finding and building a new community takes time and reflection and courage. It has resulted for me in a more full, meaningful life with the ability to be open and vulnerable, to be authentically me. Today we light the chalice for communities that embrace and encourage vulnerability.
I'm Nico, and my pronouns are they, them. Please join me in the opening words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please rise now in body or in spirit for our opening hymn, Find a Stillness, number 352 in the gray hardcover hymnal. This morning's story is about a famous Buddhist teacher named Patrul. Patrul was known to wander around, bringing his lessons to people far and wide, often while in disguise, so people would not recognize him. One day, Patrul heard a rumor about a wise old man who had been living by himself in a mountain cave for over 20 years, contemplating and perfecting patience. And so Patrul, after a long journey, finally came upon the cave of this master of patience, and without waiting for an invitation, walked right inside the cave. "Hello," came a voice from the dark. "Who are you?" "Who am I indeed?" answered Patrul. "That is the question, isn't it? Who am I? Who are you? Who are any of us really?" After a few moments of silence, the calm voice of the wise man came again. "Why are you here?" "Another great inquiry," exclaimed Patrul. "Isn't this the question that we are all pondering? Why are we here? What is the greatest goal in this life? You ask great questions." Patrul laughed and invited himself to sit on the floor next to the master, who had clearly been interrupted from his morning meditations. Patrul took a deep breath and looked at the wise old man and said, "So, what are we thinking about today?" The old man was clearly becoming a little annoyed. Sir, I am thinking about the exact same thing I have been thinking about for over 20 years, patience. The wise man's voice wasn't quite as calm as it had been before. He went on, all that time I have led a simple life of meditation and watching the seasons come and go. I have perfected patience. Oh, how wonderful, exclaimed Patrul. Let me try. And so when the wise old man stood up and looked outside, Patrul stood up and looked outside. When the wise old man sat for meditation, Patrul sat for meditation, carefully being sure to match the wise old man's movements and breaths and heavy sighs as best he could. Psst, Patrul said at last. What are we going to do next? This is getting a little boring. At that, the wise old man stood up, his eyes wide. Why can't you just leave me to my quiet retreat? Please leave my cave at once. I will leave, said Patrul, but it looks as if your patience has already left. It would have been so easy for the wise old man to quietly perfect patience without interruption in his unchallenged and safe cave in his thoughts alone. But what happens when we are challenged by others? How are we practicing living out our beliefs in patience or in justice or love when an unexpected guest shows up at the door to our mountain caves? May we be reminded to work towards growing and serving together, both quietly in unchallenged and safe spaces and when it is hard, bravely, out loud, and every single day. It is now time to sing our children and youth to their classes, so please rise in body or spirit for Go Lift It Up, number 1057 in the teal paperback hymnal. Let's take a breath together as we move into the time set aside for meditation and prayer. Move your body in a way that is comfortable for you, and turn your attention to where you are and what we are doing together right now. We are gathered here, about 100 in person and 35 households online. This morning is tender. An unspeakable amount of pain leads up to and results from the death of a 15-year-old student at the hands of a peer at Harding High School on Friday. Where there are only insufficient words to offer, we let the silence carry us. In this community, there are sorrows too vast and not ready to be named, and there are joys here of which the same thing can be said. May we not just know, but feel our interconnectedness to those seated next to us, to those present by the magic of wires and internet, to those elsewhere in the world who we have never met, but who are living this moment together with us. Let us trust that interconnected web to hold all that is in our hearts. This morning, we especially hold these members and friends of the congregation. Lisa Borg, who fell on ice this week and fractured a bone in her shoulder. Doctors are still determining if surgery is required. We pray for support and healing. Nance McLesley, who lost her mother Joyce Leslie this week on Wednesday. Her memorial will happen this coming Wednesday in Scandia. We pray for comfort and consolation in this time of grief. And now share aloud the names that are on your hearts so that we may hold them in tenderness and love. There's room enough for all. Amen.
Today, the Social Action Special Collection is for the local food shelves. The COVID pandemic and economic stresses continue to affect people in our community and their ability to secure enough food for themselves and their families. Our local food shelves strive to reduce the shortage in the households of our friends and neighbors. So there were 3 ways to donate. If you're online, you can do it in the text to give option in the chat box, or you can put a check in the locked box that is outside our front office, or you can go to the WBUUC page. No matter how you decide to give, please indicate the word food. Thank you so much for your generosity and faith in this life that we lead together.
The first reading is Snowdrops by Louise Gluck. Do you know what I was, how I lived? You know what despair is, then. Winter should have meaning for you. I did not expect to survive, earth suppressing me. I didn't expect to waken again, to feel in damp earth my body able to respond again, remembering after so long how to open again in the cold light of earliest spring. Afraid, yes, but among you again, crying, yes, risk, joy, in the raw wind of the new world. The second reading is Although the Wind by 10th century Japanese poet Izumi Shikibu. I'll read it through twice. Although the wind blows terribly here, the moonlight also leaks between the roof planks of this ruined house. Although the wind blows terribly here, the moonlight also leaks between the roof planks of this ruined house.
This next piece, Bonseaba, is from Zambia. Zambia is a country of many languages, and this one is Bemba. In translation, all that sing have the right to be called the children of God.
I read somewhere recently a paragraph that gave me pause. The author said that 1, everything changes. Yep, sounds right. Everything is connected. Again, that one checks out. And 3, everything returns, just not the same as it used to be. Oof, gut punch. That last thought is just too real sometimes to even think about for too long. But then again, the thought intrigued me, especially in this current moment that we're in where nostalgia is trending as much as it is. I see it all over right now, on the internet, in TV reboots from the 90s, which also confusingly includes that 70s show, which was actually from the 90s. Also offline, in 90s music dance parties, fashion, etc. And I also notice an interest or even obsession with nostalgia within myself, a longing for some past time, whether that time was early 2020 or even further back. Maybe you've also recently found yourself wishing for a different time, maybe a time before you experienced a recent loss, or maybe a time of relative stability. Maybe you find yourself thinking about times that seemed better than now, at least in your memory. If so, I hear you, I feel you, you are not alone. But I want to push back against this nostalgia a bit today by wondering if we're not just falling into the trap of longing for a time when we didn't feel so vulnerable. Vulnerable to change, vulnerable to the realization that we're not in control, and vulnerable to our own mortality. How can we accept the feelings of vulnerability when they arise? This is no easy question, but let's just pan out for a second. How are we vulnerable? Globally, culturally, nationally, communally, with our neighbor, with ourselves? It's pretty hard to dispute how vulnerable we are when a single tweet can affect our economies. Global climate change is constantly worsening, putting us into progressively more danger every day. Mass shootings continue to take the lives of our fellow Americans. We are definitely vulnerable, but how we respond to that vulnerability has deep meaning. As a community right now, we are undergoing some serious changes. In 2 short weeks, Reverend Sarah will be sharing her farewell sermon and then starting her terminal sabbatical. She hopes to start a new ministry somewhere else in August, as does Reverend Roger when he wraps up his interim time with us. August is the same month that our hoped-for new settled lead minister should be starting their ministry here with us. And the search process to choose that new minister might be another way that some of us are feeling vulnerable to things that aren't in our control. I do too, some days. But this is the practice of being alive, recognizing and living with our feelings of vulnerability. Of course, we might get hurt. We might experience loss. We might dread the changes in store. But we grow, we survive, we resolve, we are resilient, and we thrive. Like the snowdrops in Gluck's poem, who didn't even expect to survive. They said, "I did not expect to survive. Earth suppressing me. I didn't expect to wake again, to feel in damp earth, my body able to respond again." For one more month here at White Bear, we get that privilege to practice trust. And I don't think it's a coincidence that this month ends around the spring equinox. We get the chance to practice trust. Trust in our competent and thoughtful search committee. Trust in the process. Trust that we have 3 strong pre-candidates who will meet with the search committee, and trust that they will pick a strong candidate to come here in April and meet us. And whether it is a community or an individual going through changes, the trust that is needed to survive requires introspection and openness. In her writing, Louise Gluck calls it the art of inward listening. It requires us to face our aloneness and our mortality. Of course, we aren't invulnerable or immortal. Some days I wish that we were, but then I realized that we wouldn't fully appreciate every moment of this precious life if we had no fear of dying. How do we embrace our mortality or become friends with death? I recently encountered a children's book by Wolf Erlbruck that was published in 2007. Ente, Tod und Tulp. Oh, you want it in English? Okay. Duck, Death, and the Tulip. Looks like this. I want to share a few snippets with you today, illustrations included. For a while now, Duck had had a feeling. Who are you? What are you up to, creeping along behind me? Good, said Death, you finally noticed me. I'm Death. Duck was scared stiff. And who could blame her? You've come to fetch me? Oh, I've been close by all your life, just in case. In case of what? Asked Duck. In case something happens to you. A nasty cold, coughs, an accident, you never know. Are you gonna make something happen? Oh, life takes care of that. The coughs, the colds, all the other things that happen to you ducks. Fox, for example. Duck tried not to think about it. It gave her goosebumps. Death gave her a friendly smile. Actually, he was nice, if you forgot for a moment who he was. Really, quite nice. The story continues for a time, and Duck and Death become friends. They travel everywhere together, they go swimming in the pond, and when Death gets cold, because Death is a skeleton, Duck lays next to him to warm him up. The next morning, Duck awakes, happy to find that she didn't die in her sleep, and they begin to chat. Duck tells Death some of her theories about the afterlife. Death just looks at her. Then they climb a tree, and Duck starts pondering her mortality. They could see the pond far below. There it lay, so still and so lonely. That's what it will be like when I'm dead, Duck thought. The pond alone, without me. Let's climb down, Duck pleaded after a bit. You can start having strange thoughts in trees. Summer was ending, and they went less and less often to the pond. They sat together in the grass, saying little. When a cool wind ruffled her feathers, Duck felt its chill for the first time. I'm cold, she said one evening. Will you warm me a little? Snowflakes drifted down. Something had happened. Death looked at the duck. She'd stopped breathing. She lay quite still. Death stroked a few rumpled feathers back into place. Then he carried her to the great river. He laid her gently on the water and nudged her on her way. For a long time, he watched her. When she was lost to sight, he was almost a little moved. But that's life, thought Death. This story has really grabbed me, and I was more than a little moved when I first read it. The symbol of the tulip, not unlike these amaryllis and paperwhites that I plant every winter for myself, remind me of the beauty that is there, hiding sometimes, about to break open and bloom. And Death in the story is carrying this tulip for most of the story, and for me, it has been a symbol that beauty, like death, is with us for our whole lives. Death and tulip, beauty and mortality are interconnected and inescapable. Which brings me back to the poem that Nico read for us from the 10th century by Izumi Shikibu. Although the wind blows terribly here, the moonlight also leaks between the roof planks of this ruined house. The house is not impenetrable. There are gaps and cracks in the planks. It is vulnerable to the pain of the wind, but it is also vulnerable to the beauty of the moonlight. What a striking image in such few words. And I think our fear of mortality also relates to our fear of being alone. We don't like the feeling of vulnerability when we're alone, but that's where the richness is. That's where we can practice being alive. There are numerous facets to the vulnerability of being alone. First of all, there is the profound depth there. Not everyone loves spending time with themselves, which reminds me about the best advice I've ever heard for college students, or really anyone for that matter. Take yourself out on a date. Go to dinner alone, or a movie, or a play. a museum, or even a nature walk. Get comfortable with yourself. It's the longest relationship you'll ever be in for the rest of your life. Get used to it. Some people don't like what they see when they're fully alone, without people or devices or books or other content or input, just you and your thoughts. Facing that aloneness can be scary for some, and it's a worthy and worthwhile thing to explore every once in a while, whether on a silent retreat or a solo camping trip, or even in a daily meditation practice. This is step one. The shadow side of this being alone relates to those of us who have, especially recently, felt too alone, maybe even painfully isolated. We have too much alone time, some of us. We actually need to risk telling others that we need them, that we need support and community, kindness and solidarity, shared meals and a listening ear. For that reason, and just for a few moments, we're going to engage in a practice of shared vulnerability today. I'm going to ask you to turn to a neighbor and discuss something that you learned recently while you were alone. Maybe you learned a lesson or a deeper truth about yourself. Maybe in your solitude you learned about something you really enjoy or really don't enjoy. We're just going to take about 2 minutes here so that each person has about 1 minute to share. If you're participating on Zoom, feel free to share what you learned in solitude in the chat box and witness the learnings of others as well. I'll bring us back together in just about 2 minutes with the bell. Feel free to turn to a neighbor you know, or maybe even one you don't know, if you want extra points. I'll bring you back in 2 minutes. What is something you learned recently while you were alone? Thank you for engaging in that practice. It's always fun to look out and hear all the conversations and connections. You know, we talked a bit about people who are maybe feeling too alone, and there's also people who are too often with people and need some alone time. It might feel weird to ask for alone time if you live with a partner or roommates or kids, but we all need it. Our alone time is when we connect to our truest self, to the self who came into the world as an individual, who can choose to live as an individual, and who will die one day as an individual. This self deserves our attention, our care, and our curiosity. Kind of like an amaryllis or a paperwhite or the snowdrop in Gluck's poem, our self needs water and sunshine, pruning and tending, so that we can truly blossom, remembering after so long how to open again in the cold light of earliest spring. Afraid, yes, but among you again. Crying, yes, risk joy in the raw wind of the new world. May we all risk joy despite the raw wind of the new world. May we remember how to blossom again despite not believing or expecting that we'll survive. May we find the moonlight sneaking through the gaps between the roof planks. May we befriend our mortality and find the tulip that death carries with him. May we find the stillness and the silence. And may we learn the lessons that solitude and community have in store for us. May it be so, and make it so. Amen. Our closing hymn is Filled with Loving Kindness in the teal softcover hymnal, 1031. Please rise in body or spirit.
Please join me in the closing words. May peace dwell within our hearts and understanding in our minds. May courage steel our will and the love of truth forever guide us.